gentlemen, this is Cynthia the Audiophile, and I am here with Michael Fremer. Hi, Michael.
Hi, Cynthia.
So, how did you make your first connection with being an audiophile, so to speak?
Oh, well, this is before there was electricity, young lady, so I used to have to sneak into my house with records because my parents were so upset that I was wasting all my money on records.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
That's crazy.
They had a very harmonic, beautiful sound. They had beautiful harmonies, and the song went, "Glow, little glowworm, glimmer, glimmer, la la."
So how many records do you have now?
About 16,000.
And you still collect it?
Probably more than 16,000.
I've heard of vinyl being referred to as imperfect perfection and CDs as perfect imperfection.
No, they're both imperfect, and they're imperfect in different ways. From the tape.
Oh my goodness.
I would like to invite you over to watch us do that. Would you like to come? Yes, I'll be there. Well, we'll pay you a way to come. Even if you grew up in Alabama and you talk like that, as soon as you go to Florida, you talk like that. That's what happens. Hey, you're not retired yet? Come on down to Florida. It's great.
So what about virgin vinyl versus recycled vinyl? Is there really a difference? Can you hear it?
Well, my understanding you can hear it, but my understanding from pressing plants, when you talk to them, a lot of them say the best vinyl, the best formulation is mostly virgin vinyl with some regrind in it. Why that is, I don't know. But all things being equal, virgin vinyl is going to be quieter because it has fewer impurities in it.
Right.
But there's so many variables, and you know,
yeah.
Pressing is another black art.
It could be different depending on what you're listening to in the record. You're right, there are a lot of variables.
Yeah.
So what about 45 versus 33? I have a...
Well, you were in the, did you hear the demo I did with that?
I did. I listened to the Led Zeppelin album on 45. It was amazing.
Was it a Classic Records version?
I don't know.
It probably was, because I don't think anybody else did them at 45.
It was the one that you played in there that you said had it in it.
Oh, Stairway to Heaven. Yeah, Stairway to Heaven.
Yeah, I thought that sounded amazing. But I have an Alan Parsons album that, well, I have multiple versions of it, but I have the 120 gram vinyl of iRobot, and then I have a 180 gram 45 virgin vinyl version of it. And when I'm playing them, and they're both original master recordings, I'm listening and I still like the 120 gram version better, so it's sort of weird.
All kinds of variables. Was it mastered at the same time, or was one released later, or were they both, you don't know.
I think it was mastered later, but they took it from the original master.
Right, so there were two different mastering chains, it's like I played that Kenny Burrell record. So 45 was cut by the same guy, but 15, 20 years ago. The other one was cut more recently, and it's at 33, and it sounds much better. So Neil Young released a bunch of records that were done at 140 and 200. Same mastering, same time, and they just pressed at the same time. I thought the 180 definitely sounded better.
So if it's the same record, the same mastering, and you're listening to 33 versus 45, which do you think is better? Because I hear that with 45, since it's going at a higher RPM, they have to put less information on each side.
It should sound better for a number of reasons. The waveforms don't get scrunched up on the inner groove areas because you're ending the side earlier, because you're breaking it up into 4 sides. Whereas on the 33, it's going to go further and further to the inside, and so the radius gets smaller and smaller, and then the waveforms go from that to. I'm exaggerating.
Yeah, but so the slower timing doesn't really matter as much, though.
Yeah, the old records where it was cut to the inside, what your brain does is it adjusts as you play it. If you play at the beginning and play at the end, you'll hear it's not as bright. It's going to be darker at the end because the high frequencies get kind of crunched.
Yeah.
But if you're listening, you don't notice it. That's proof that your brain can't be trusted and you have to measure everything. No, it's not. Stop.
Proof right
This
there.
is the inner dialogue I have with my tormentors.
So I was also wondering about half speed because I have Abraxas on half speed, and I can hear every single chime and every single instrument, and I really love that album. My mom first introduced me to it, and then I ended up getting a pristine copy of it. So what is the deal with half speed, and do you like half speed better?
Generally not, no. Some are good, and some are not. And the advantage is you're cutting at half speed, so everything's going more slowly. So the cutter head can take its time engraving, you know, the lacquer. That's the theory, so that's going to make it more accurate, because this is an electromechanical thing, and you know, it's moving and it's got issues of following it. So the slower it can go, the more accurate it can be. On the other hand, if something is a 30 hertz bass note, at half speed it's a 15 hertz bass note. So it's a little harder to get the energy at 15 hertz. On the other hand, because of the RIAA curve, you're rolling everything off anyway, so it's not quite as much low frequency energy as you'd think. But still, the weakest part about half speed mastering is bass, and yet what ends up happening is they try boosting it a little bit to make it up, and then it sounds boomy and plummy.
And at some point, is it digitally mastered?
Well, now, like the Abbey Road stuff, they only can do, for some reason they only cut half speed from digital files. And it's easier to do a file at half speed than a tape recorder at half speed, for whatever reasons.
So do you like analog, or do you like digital put on analog?
I prefer, all things being equal, I prefer an all analog everything.
That's what I prefer.
That said, the Beatles, the Sgt. Pepper from a digital source, from a high-res digital source, and the White Album from a digital source sound great on. They sound better on vinyl than on the CDs. And people say, well, how is that possible? Well, first of all, if you're cutting from a high-resolution file, it's going to sound better than a 16-bit CD. If you're cutting 24 bits, that's a better sounding file than a 16-bit CD, no doubt. So then you're cutting, and the guy that's doing the cutting is saying, I want to put as much dynamic range on this record as I can, because if I make it really loud, I can't fit everything on the record. Whereas the CD guy today, it's so perverse, the CD guy today is saying, the people who buy CDs like it loud, and I can make it loud on a CD because I got 72 minutes, so I can really slam it. And so when you buy a CD today, they're usually crunched, whereas the record has wider dynamic range. It makes no sense.
Yeah, I'm always finding myself turning my system down when I put on a CD and turning it way up when I'm putting on vinyl.
Yeah, because the vinyl has more dynamic range. Also, the CD, it's got this annoying, fatiguing quality. It's not like noise. It's not a noise that you hear, but your brain senses this noise. I can't explain it, but you put a CD on and you're listening. Even when it's a good CD, you go, wow, this is good. It's gotten really good now. And you're sitting there, and then you put the record on and you go, that's what happens.
Yeah.
I know it. And then you say, why is that happening? Then you put the CD back on and you realize that even though there's no physical noise, there's some other phenomenon, and I don't think we've really explored what it is. Maybe we don't have to because CDs are going to go away. There's something that happens in your brain that it's going brrrr, it's making this noise in your brain that you don't hear as noise, but you hear as tension, or you hear as something that's getting...
Your brain's picking it up. It's clinical.
Yeah, your brain is saying, I don't like this. Stop it. I don't know why that is.
I don't either.
Although I can give you one reason, and that is, our comfort zone, our survival depends upon knowing where things are in time. So our sense of timing is extremely critical. And CDs, especially in the early days, the filters, the brick wall filters that we used to cut at 20K, the anti-aliasing filters, because above 20K you were getting these doublings of the frequency that would root, they had to be in it. You had a brick wall filter at 20K. I'm not a complete expert on this, but the brick wall filter was there at 20K. And those early filters were not very good, and they rang. And so there were artifacts of ringing. And the ringing went up in frequency and it went down in frequency. So the ringing entered into the music. And it was affecting the phase and the timing. So the timing was being put off. And the timing being off is why early CDs sounded flat and hard and you couldn't hear any space. Or if there was a recording of a piano in a hall that you were familiar with on a record, on the record you could see the piano. You could hear the sounding board of the piano vibrating, and then you could hear the whole piano vibrating, reflecting off the hall, from the back of the hall, on the side of the hall. And that would turn into your brain seeing a piano in a hall, in a space, in 3 dimensions. And it's very pleasing. The early CDs, taking that analog tape and putting it into a CD, destroyed all of that timing information.
Yeah.
And so, first of all, you'd hear the piano, but the attack of the note would sound wrong. The reverb of the sounding board would get mixed in with the reverb in the hall, and it would all get mixed into a complete mess. So you didn't know where the piano was, you didn't know where the reverb was, and your brain doesn't like that, because when the brain doesn't know where it is, it gets upset because it's not comfortable. It doesn't know.
It's chaos.
Yeah, it's chaos. It doesn't know where things are. It's not comfortable, and that's why early CDs sounded horrible, and people stopped listening, and they didn't say it's because of that, because they were programmed to say CDs are perfect. So if there's a problem, it's something else. And at first it was, oh, you don't like the sound because you're used to distortion from records, that second order distortion, and I can show you the distortion numbers. And this is perfect. You don't like perfect, you like imperfect, but this is not perfect. But it wasn't perfect. And so then it became, oh, it's something else you don't like. You don't like the wide frequency response. You don't like, you'd rather have it rolled up. No, it was something else. So what it was, and why you're not listening to music anymore? Because you're busy doing video games. That's what it is. That's why you're turning off your record player, or you're turning off your stereo, because we have video games now. Too many distractions. And I always said, no, that's not what it is. What it is you put a CD on and your brain gets fatigued very quickly. And it says, hey, do something else. So at first what your brain would have you do is, hey, why don't you read a book while you're listening? So music went into the background. You read a book, you talk, you do something else, you do exercise, and then pretty soon it was, well, I don't listen that much anymore. Or I listen in the car. Because why can you listen in the car? Because I'm driving. I have to pay attention. I have to know where the road is. I have to know where the other cars are. My sense of space is really well defined now. So I can listen to that crappy CD that's screwing up all the timing cues because my brain is comfortable driving.
Mm-hmm.
That's my explanation. And right or wrong, it's my explanation, and I'm living with it.
I've heard of vinyl being referred to as imperfect perfection and CDs as perfect imperfection.
No, they're both imperfect. And they're imperfect in different ways. And the ways in which CDs are imperfect is toxic, and the ways in which records are imperfect is not toxic. It's forgiving. I've always looked at it that way, but I'll tell you a really funny story. So, I used to drive old Saabs, and I can show you a picture of an old Saab. And I drove it from California to New York, and I went to visit a friend in Soho, and I parked it on the street behind another just like mine. And there weren't that many around at that point in time, but it was just like mine, and it was red, and it had North Carolina license plates. When I came out of my friend's apartment, this guy comes running out, and he says, who services your car? Who works on your car? Because I moved up here. I moved up here from North Carolina, and I need someone to work on my car. I said, I do a lot of work on my car. I said, I'm one of 3 Jews outside of Tel Aviv who does all his own car work. I rebuilt it. So I said, you got a card? Here's my card. If you ever have any problems, call me, and I'll help you. So it turns out this guy was Don Dixon's lawyer. You know who Don Dixon was?
No.
He's a record producer, and he was married to Marty Jones, who was a singer, who was very good, and Don Dixon was involved in all the Georgia and North Carolina bands during the 80s, REM and all of that whole scene.
Yeah.
Just by coincidence, I didn't know that when we exchanged cards. That's one of the great things about communicating with people and not being afraid to give out cards or help people, say, I'll help you. So a couple of months later, I get this call from this guy. He says, hey, remember me? I had the yellow Saab, and I have a problem. I left my car in my friend's garage in Montclair, New Jersey, and I can't get the clutch to disengage. Do you know what that is? I said, I know exactly what that is, and I'll come down and I'll fix it for you. It won't cost any money. It's a quick fix. It'll look horrible, but it'll work. So I drove to Montclair. It was a half an hour. I went out of my way 40 minutes.
Yeah.
And pulled to this nice house, and I pull up, and they come out of the house. 2 guys come out of the house, and the guy goes, hey, I want to meet a friend of mine. This is Greg Calby. I said, Greg Calby, you're the mastering engineer at Sterling Sound. He goes, you know who I am? I said, I can name 20 of your best records. I've got them all. I follow what you do. You're a great mastering engineer. He goes, oh, wow, that's cool. So then I fixed the guy's clutch, which involved it involves starting the car in gear with the clutch engaged, having jerk and jerk and jerk, and then you put it in the clutch and you pound on it, and the car's going boom, boom, and eventually the clutch disengages. What happens over time is it gets stuck over time because you're not using it. And fixed this car, and then Greg, and then I said, hey, I'd like you to come over and listen to my stereo. He said, I just remastered the entire Peter Gabriel catalog for CD. Should I bring them over?
Oh my goodness.
He said, yeah, why don't you bring them over? I said, I have all the original British pressings. Did you listen to the records before you did the mastering? He goes, no, I just got the tapes and, you know. Okay. I knew what was going to happen. It was going to really be bad.
Was it?
Oh my God. So what happened was he came over and sat down. We played the CD, and I knew, and he, at that point, in all honesty, he didn't have a very good reference system in his mastering suite. It wasn't that good. And he played it. He went, "Wow, this system's really fantastic. These CDs sound better than." I said, "Okay, now I want to play an original British Charisma pressing of that same song." Okay, and I put it on, and within like a half a note, or well, more than a half a song, he went like this. He went, "Oh, what's going on?" I said, "Okay, that you're hearing what I've been screaming about. This, I don't know why this is, but you hear what happened? It's like there's no image. It's flat. It's bright. It's hard. It's not your fault. It's the system. Play a different one." Every one we played was like that. I said, "These CDs are going to come out. Everybody's going to say it's great. Don't worry about it. You know what happened.
Yeah.
Or you know what it is. It's not your fault. But CDs suck." You heard it. Didn't take long. And we're still friends. He's a great guy, and he comes over every once in a while and brings his other friends, and we sit and we drink wine, and we're getting on in years. We have so much fun.
That's such a good story.
Yeah.
The story of how you met him and everything.
And he's updated his system tremendously in Sterling Sound.
I bet after he heard yours.
Yeah, he ended up, well, when he was still at Sterling in New York, he ended up getting these nice Pro-Act speakers, and he had some Audio Research tube amps, and he put out great recordings. And I was there when they remastered Bitches Brew from the master tapes, and I had Bitches Brew master tapes in my hands. It was really cool.
That is really cool.
It is really cool. I can tell you all kinds of really great vinyl stories that I tell young people, you will never have a story like this if all you do is stream. You just won't have it. Now, I'm not saying you're going to have the kind of stories like what I've had. Amazing. You want to hear another one?
Sure. I'd love to.
Okay, so this one involves when I got to Boston in 1969, and I was going to law school, which is a whole nother story. And I walked to the corner of Kenmore Square, and there was a record store there. And you have to walk up steps to get to the record store. And I see at the top of the steps, there's a point of purchase cardboard rack, and there was a set of albums on it, and it was loose-fitting plastic. So American records were shrink-wrapped tight, which was really stupid because it was heat shrink-wrapped and it could warp the records. But in the UK, they didn't do that. They had like a very loose-fitting piece of plastic, and it just sat there, and it wouldn't distort the records. And I was a fanatic for British records, and I saw it was a British record, so I walk up the steps, and it was Abbey Road.
Oh my goodness.
That came out I knew Abbey Road was coming out in America like in a week or 2 weeks, but here it was in America, and I bought that copy. And over time, I ended up doing the radio commercials for that record store, which is a whole nother story. And I met all the people at the record store, and the kid that put that record in that rack was named Steve Berkowitz. You may know that name. He was a 16-year-old record buyer for New England Music City and Cheap Thrills Records. And he ended up working for Sony Legacy in charge of the Miles Davis and the Bob Dylan catalog. And he still does all of that. And he's a top producer. And he was the kid responsible for getting that record there. And I still have that pressing. And then the Beatles came out. The box was done in stereo from digital files, and it was not very good. I didn't like it. But I wrote a nice, respectful review and tried to explain why I didn't like it. And then a few years later, I got a call one out of the blue. I pick up the phone and it goes, Michael Fremer, this is so-and-so from Abbey Road, and we read your review of the stereo box set, and you didn't much like it, but you were very respectful. And, we were going to do the mono box set on vinyl from the CDs that we had prepared. But after reading what you wrote, we've decided we're going to do it the way you wanted it done, from the tape.
Oh my goodness.
And we'd like to invite you over to watch us do that. Would you like to come? Yes, I'll be there. Well, we'll pay you a way to come.
Oh my God.
And so you know who invited me to Abbey Road to watch that? Steve Berkowitz, because they hired him to supervise the box.
That's amazing.
I mean,
what a story.
Yeah, all true.
Sounds like you're living a very full life.
Yes, right now it's the best. You know, it's really weird because I figure at this time in my life, where most of my friends are in Florida playing shuffleboard. They're down there saying, "Hey, you're still working? What are you working for? You should," because I don't know whether you know this stuff, but if you're Jewish and you go to Florida, even if you grew up in Alabama and you talk like that, as soon as you go to Florida, you talk like that. That's what happens. Hey, you're not retired yet? Come on down to Florida. It's great. No, I'm not going to Florida. I am having right now. It's like everything that's happening with vinyl and with especially all these young people that I get to meet. And if you work with young people and they look up to you and and then you can look up to them for what they can bring to the table. The whole thing it's unbelievable, you know, and I'm having like the best time right now. It couldn't be.
This is the most exciting time.
Maybe it'll get better, but right now it's as good as it can get. And you know, that's why this 13-year-old kid, he said to me, I hope I get the story right, because I got it slightly wrong the last time and he yelled at me. He said at one point, he said, I think this is how it goes. He said, you have to live to be 92. Because when you're 92, I'll be 33 and a third.
What a nerd.
Yeah, a great nerd. I think that's how it went. And if it did, he'll see this, because he'll see everything I do, he finds. He'll go, I didn't say it that way, you moron. I said it a different way. So it's fine. But it was something like that, you know.
Yeah.
And so it's great. And like even today, a 19-year-old kid came up to me and said, he said, I wanna, how do I get to write about hi-fi? How did you do it? How do I do it? I said, how I did it is different than the way you'll be able to do it, because it's a different world. It's easier for you now. You can, here's my card. If you want to write something, write something. Pick a record that you know. It could even have been written about it. Somebody else could have written about it. Pick a record you know and give me a review of it, you know. Give me some background. You know, if it's a band that's had 20 records, talk about the other records they've had out. Talk about the band. Talk about where this record sits in their catalog. Talk about how it was mastered, how it sounds compared to an original place. Show me that you know what you're talking about, and show me that you know how to express it and write it and have some flow. And if it's even halfway good, it doesn't have to be great. If it's even halfway good, I'll edit it. I'll send it back and say, here is what it looks like edited. And do another one. And if you show promise and get it good, I'll publish you and pay you. Mm-hmm. It's not that difficult. That's how this 13-year-old kid. Oh yeah, I read his stuff. He's great. I don't know if I'm that good. I said, don't worry about it. I'm not that good. You know? I mean, he's amazing.
I'm really interested to read his writing now after all the stories you've told me about him.
Yeah, I'll show you the thing he wrote yesterday about REM. You know the band REM, right? I'll show you that, because it's like, you know, that's what he wrote. I edited a few minor little things, but it's what he wrote. And it's an album that came out 12 years before he was born. But he wrote it as if he lived it when it came out.
And then just for the audience, the young man that Michael is referring to is Malachi Liu. Malachi
Liu, L-U-I, yeah. And he's an amazing kid. I have another young man writing from me who's also very good. And he was afraid to hand anything in because I'm not as good as that kid. I said, don't worry about it. You're you. Don't be anybody else but you. And he handed it, and what I had him do was he found an old Marantz receiver in this school that he goes to in the basement, and they said he could have it and it wouldn't play. And he emailed me and said, I can't find a schematic, can you help me? So I knew the people at Marantz, and they were happy to get him the schematic. And he fixed it. And I like the fact that he's a hands-on electrical guy, and he fixed it. And I said, you write up that experience and I'll publish it. I'll see how you write and let's see what happens. And my attitude was, well, not that many people are going to read it because it's not about analog. It's not really about who we are.
Yeah.
But let's see what happens. So he wrote it, and it was good. It needed some work, but it was good. I published it. Within a couple of days, he had 6,000 people had read it. That's a lot in a couple of days. It was not at all what I expected. And so it's so cool that you say, don't go by what your own instinct tells you always. Take a chance. I mean, it didn't cost anything to publish it.
it's better to take a chance than not.
Yes, and great feedback for him. That the first thing he gets published has 6,000 people reading it.
And what is his name?
His name is Caleb. Caleb Attaway. So I have Caleb and Malachi. Now we just need a Hispanic guy named Jesus, and I'll have the whole Bible writing for me.
Maybe we can get some water turned into wine for us. If that's
yeah, something like that. Well, you know what? This whole thing is miraculous. Everything that's going on right now is miraculous. So
I agree.
So it's good.
Well, Michael, thank you so much
You're
for
welcome.
doing this interview with me. I really had fun.
Me too.
This is Cynthia the Audiophile signing out.